Hey everybody, this is a bit of a different video for the channel. Rather than reading from a curated script about a specific character, I wanted to take a moment to just have a casual conversation about Void Rivals. So Void Rivals is a comic series, a brand new IP that was created to kind of introduce the Energon Universe. The first issue when it came out had a kind of guest appearance from Jetfire from Transformers. It was supposed to be kind of this, oh my goodness, Jetfire's in this comic? There's Transformers in this comic? But I think that that surprise was a little spoiled just because you have to market the product. But when the product actually first came out, when Void Rivals issue number 1 first came out, I did not read it. I was not interested. I had heard that Jetfire was in it. I had heard it was setting up this new Energon Universe with Transformers and G.I. Joe, and I thought, I'm just going to stick with Transformers for now. So I read the Transformers comics, and I thought, let me give Void Rivals a try. Let me see what it's about. Let me see if it's worth my time and my money. And that's kind of a question that I want to answer here, is not just my thoughts. Is it worth your time and money? So it's not required reading for the Transformers comic. There are a lot of through lines. There's a lot of things that connect and really make you go, oh, I wonder what they're going to do with this. And I do kind of hope that in the future they cross lines a little bit more. We see Void Rivals and Transformers and the G.I. Joe comic series, which I'm not as familiar with. I do hope to see those kind of intersect even more. We did have a big intersection in the Free Comic Book Day comic, which had all 3 included, and that was a great time. But Void Rivals, what are my thoughts on it? Well, Void Rivals is interesting. I enjoy the idea of a brand new IP, something that I know nothing about, something that I can kind of jump into and get immersed into. The artwork in these comics is wonderful. I really enjoy the colors and the style of everything. I like seeing the different societies that Derek and Celila, the main characters, hail from. One thing that I do have an issue though with the comic book is the characters themselves. So Derek and Celila are the primary characters here, and they're from 2 opposing societies that live on a single world. It's like this kind of Halo-esque ring planet with a giant hole in the middle, and they live on each side, and they hate each other. That's not the most original idea in the world. That doesn't bug me. That the premise is maybe a little overused. That doesn't bug me at all. What bugs me is the characters. Derek is kind of a wisecracking pilot who's not that great at fighting, and Celila is a much more battle-hardened warrior who doesn't like jokes at all. And on their own, I don't think these are bad characteristics. I don't think these are bad traits. But putting these 2 characters together in these situations and having them bicker with each other, it's a little old for me, I guess. It really makes me think of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I'm not familiar with the comics as much, but the movies in particular with Star-Lord and Gamora. Kind of this goofy male character who has a charm to him and is a pilot, and maybe he's not the greatest fighter, and then a female character who's very serious and not joking, and they don't get along, but they kind of got a little bit of romance going between them. I don't think that that's a bad premise or a bad story to tell. But Void Rivals, at least in my opinion, doesn't do too much to change it up or give me something new. So the reason I'm continuing to read is twofold. It's because of all of the Transformers characters showing up and all of the through lines that they're building into the Transformers comic series, but also because I'm really interested in, again, kind of the deeper lore to these worlds. While I'm not the biggest fan of the main characters, I really love the art style and the architecture style of these different races and how they're very similar in different ways, but also how they're kind of almost totally opposite from each other. But most importantly, actually, there's a third secret reason why I love this comic, and that is Skuxxoid. Come on, you gotta admit, if we had a Skuxxoid comic, we'd be set for life. Skuxxoid is kind of a throwaway character from Generation 1 that a lot of people probably never really thought of a lot after the show was completed. And yet the writers have brought him into this world as his own character. And his character is surprisingly emotional. There's surprisingly a lot of weight to this character, and you really want to learn more about him. And that brings up kind of back to that original problem I had with it, is that Skuxxoid, who is, for the most part, kind of a side character, a lesser important character to the main story, feels more engaging or more interesting than Derek and Celila. So, with issue 12 having just released, I had originally thought that issue 12 would kind of be the wrap-up of a story arc. The Transformers comic by Daniel Warren Johnson is kind of wrapping up this first story arc in issue 12, and I thought that's what Void Rivals was doing, but it's not, which is totally fine. Issue 12 kind of seems more like a mid-season break. And that's something else that I really want to drive home about Void Rivals, is that I think it has a harder time in general with the audiences. Yes, the new Transformers comic is kind of a new continuity. It's a new story, they're doing new ideas, it's not connected to anything else. It does have to think about new readers and bringing people in who know nothing about Transformers, but Transformers is an established IP, and so we don't need to spend too much time on learning who these characters are or how these characters tick unless there's a really big change in them. We can kind of scoot past that and get going, onto the action. Void Rivals doesn't have that luxury. Void Rivals has to take the time to get you to know these characters, to get you to know the society and how the world works and just how things work. And so far, I don't think that they've done a bad job at letting me know how these characters work. I'm just not super interested in them now that I know what makes them tick. Again, Void Rivals is by no means lazy or poorly written. I just think it's very average at the moment. I am looking forward to more comics in the run. It looks like issue 13 and 14 and 15 have some more interesting ideas that are showing up, and I'm excited to see where those ideas go and where this comic is going to end up. So should you try Void Rivals? Well, I would say go ahead and pick it up and try reading some of the series if you enjoy Transformers a lot. There's a lot of nods and through lines here and there. That's not the only reason to read it. That shouldn't be the only reason that the comic is good. At the moment, I think those are kind of the highlights, the best moments in it. But there are still some really cool ideas and characters that they seem to be kind of playing around with. So overall, like the thumbnail says, the comic is okay. It's all right. It's not groundbreaking. It's not the greatest thing ever. It's definitely not as good as the Transformers comic, but I don't think it's necessarily horrible. I think it just has a lot of room to grow. I think it really needs to work on some character beats and some really big moments to really get us super invested into the series itself. I'm going to continue to read it. I'm a fan of specific characters in the art style. I mean, if you just look at my channel, my channel icon is one of the characters from the comic series itself. So I'm going to continue to read it. My guess is that once issue 24 comes out, I'll probably do a follow-up video to kind of say, hey, here's volumes 3 and 4. Here's what I think of the comic series now, and kind of update my recommendation for it. Again, I'm hoping that it gets better. I'm hoping that they move in the direction that they currently are and kind of improving some of the character work. But until then, at least in my opinion, Void Rivals is perfectly okay. But anyways, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about Void Rivals if you have read it, if you have not, if you enjoy it, if you agree with me, if you totally disagree with me. I love to hear all of that. Thank you guys so much for all the support as always, and I'll see you all in the next video.